Warning, this video contains images of Halder and some viewers may find them annoying. Anyway, we do have a few questions today by two patrons, so let's get on with the first one. Alexander Kerscher has said, because of your Stalingrad campaign videos, I also have a new question. Why did the OKW use badly equipped troops of its allies to secure the flanks of the 6th Army while sending a tank army into the mountains of the Caucasus? Sending the Allied armies to invade the Caucasus and securing the flank with a tank army would have made the Soviet counteroffensive impossible, and in the mountains, the Italian and Romanian mountain troops could have shown their strength. So can you please explain why they didn't do so? Three Axis armies entered the Caucasus in 1942. You had the 1st Panzer Army, the 17th Army, and the 3rd Romanian Army, or at least part of it. So, yeah, it kind of makes no sense to have tanks on mountains. However, you've got to understand that the bottom of the Caucasus region was mountainous, but the middle and the top were actually plains or, low hills and that sort of thing. So it wasn't like this, the whole of the Caucasus was mountainous. And you need tanks to break through the lines and do all that other stuff in order to get to the mountains. So it makes sense why they sent one army south, which was a tank army, or the Panzer Army, the 1st Panzer Army. That does make sense. But once they get to the mountain region, then you've got to point, why are they sending tanks there and not mountainous units? Well, they did send some mountain units, and the Romanian army that went south was actually mainly a cavalry force, and then it turned about and went north, I think in the September time, in order to reinforce the Don front. But the Romanians did send some mountain units into the Caucasus. In August, they sent the 3rd Mountain Division into the Caucasus, and it fought in some of the hills and the mountains there and did a pretty decent job. You then, in the September time, the 2nd Mountain Division, I think it was, participated in part of the German operations there and did a pretty decent job because they had support from the German Luftwaffe and whatever else. So you did actually have mountain units going into the Caucasus, and this makes sense. What you don't see is the Italian mountain units, the Alpine Corps, going south into the Caucasus, and you've got to go point, why didn't they send them in there? The Italians agreed to go in on the Eastern Front for whatever reason. That, to me, that doesn't make any sense anyway, but let's just say, okay, they agreed to do that, and they were going into the Caucasus, or at least that area. And so the Italian High Command was like, okay, we'll send the Alpine Corps to the Eastern Front, and these will go into the Caucasus. As Hope Hamilton points out in Sacrifice on the Steppe, in Chapter 2, there's no plan. The Germans and Italian High Commands don't have a plan for the Italians to go into the Caucasus. There was not pre-arranged. It was just the Italians were just being sent to the east, and then, they'll figure out what they're going to do with them. And so, while the Alpine Corps was told, you're going into the Caucasus, there was no agreed plan on that. And on the 19th of September, they get told, actually, you're not going to the Caucasus, you're going to the Don front. And so they're diverted north, and there was, apparently, according to Hamilton, there's a lot of complaints about this, which is rightly so, because it turns out that the Alpine Corps, the Italian Alpine Corps, had no weaponry, basically. They had no anti-tank guns, and they were equipped for mountain warfare. And so they had mules, and their unit was basically, it would have been okay or decent in a mountain region. It wasn't going to be very good on the Don front. And so they were diverted north. And so it seems like there was a bit of a communication breakdown between the German and Italian and then also Romanian high commands about where these troops should be going. I think the problem with the German situation, or the Axis situation in 1942, is that they're trying to do too many things at the same time. And so what ends up happening is Paulus gets drawn into Stalingrad, you have this massive Don front, which needs to be garrisoned, and even when they send the Romanians there and all the Italians, they still don't have enough troops in the Don front. The other issue is that when the 1st Panzer Army gets into the Caucasus and then gets bogged down in the mountainous areas, it's not like it can just turn about and go back north and help Paulus out. That's not a maneuver it can really do. They can't really just retreat from Stalingrad, let's say. They can't just retreat from some of these areas, because if they do that, they're going to lose ground. And, the whole point of the campaign was to get the oil of the Caucasus. So if they retreat out of the Caucasus, they're going to have no oil. So it's not like really, retreat's not really on the cards here. So once the Romanians and whatever else are in the Caucasus, once the situation develops at Stalingrad and along the Don front, the troops have to go north. The decision as to why the Italians were sent north and the Alpine troops were sent north specifically doesn't really make any sense to me, and I don't know why. Hamilton kind of just says, yes, it happens, but doesn't really explain why, and I don't have an explanation. He blames it on Hitler and the German High Command, and that might be true, but I don't have the specifics of that, unfortunately. What I can tell you is that as Stalingrad is happening, and as the battles on the Don are happening, the Italian army on the Don and the 6th Army get attacked in the Serafimovich area, and they need reinforcing immediately. And so it makes sense why they sent the Alpine troops there. If the Alpine troops had been a normal regular infantry division or whatever, then it would have made perfect sense. But you're correct, why didn't they send these troops into the Caucasus? In an ideal situation, they probably would have done. I think what the main issue here is that they split their forces too much, and they were just trying to plug gaps by the time you get to the August and September period. Which then brings us on to the next question. Christopher Scarpino has said, "Hi Tick, regarding the question of whether it was even valuable for 6th Army to go into Stalingrad proper, did any of the German general staff try to talk Hitler or Paulus out of this action? Did anyone realise that, as I mentioned in my very long post, there are plenty of other places to cut the river traffic along the Volga, if that is all the Germans wanted to do? Why did they lose focus on their true strategic goal, capturing Soviet oil for Germany and denying the same oil to the Soviets? How did they get so far off track? Thanks, great program." So did the German general staff try and convince Paulus or Hitler not to go into Stalingrad? No, not as far as I'm aware. I haven't seen anything like that. Halder, in his diary, does not mention the fact that the Germans should pull out of Stalingrad. He mentions Stalingrad all over the place. He talks about it pretty much every single day from this, the period when they enter the city. He doesn't say at any point, okay, we need to withdraw these troops. He doesn't say even, oh, the Don flank is problematic and that we need to reinforce it. He doesn't say anything like that. And so the German High Command, as far as I'm aware, were happy for Paulus to enter the city, at least up until the September period. Maybe later they changed their mind, but by the time they're actually in the city, up to that point, there's no talk of, no, we shouldn't enter the city or anything like that. So there's a bit of a myth, oh, Paulus wanted to go into the city, or Hitler drove him into the city, or something like that. Not from the sources. It doesn't appear that way. It looks like all the Germans were happy for him to go into the city, or weren't even thinking about it, and he just did that. And, there seems to be a sort of myth developing that, it was all Paulus's fault, or it was all Hitler's fault. No, they all seem to be colluding together. They're all responsible for this. And it's to do with the whole, can Paulus take it on the march? Oh no, he doesn't take it on the march, therefore he's now stuck in attritional warfare, and then it's too late to pull out at that point. So I think we have to realise that the Germans and the generals and all, Hitler and everybody else, nobody was saying that do not enter Stalingrad. It was only after the disaster that they went, oh, maybe we shouldn't have entered Stalingrad. Maybe that was the problem. Okay, now we're going to come out as saying that we didn't want, it was all Madman Hitler's fault. We shouldn't have entered Stalingrad. It's like nobody was saying it at the time. Later on they might have done, but not at the time. And that's something we've got to be very careful of. As far as losing the focus of the front, if we look at things from the German perspective, in, let's say, the July period, the Soviet army in the south has disintegrated. They've either withdrawn or they've not withdrawn. It doesn't matter. The point is that they've disintegrated or withdrawn from the German perspective, and Hitler issues Order 45, splitting Army Group South, but Army Groups A and B from each other. B goes to the Don front, A goes into the Caucasus. That is a vital decision. Now, the original plan was they would go to Stalingrad and Astrakhan, then they would go south, but because the Soviet armies have disintegrated, from the Germans' perspective, and we see this from, it's not just Hitler, Halder sees it, they all see it, they all say the same thing, we're winning, Soviet armies have collapsed, we're going to win. So they then make this decision, right, we're going to split the forces into two, and that, at that moment, is when you see the lack of focus, because they then start getting stretched too thin, and they can't cover all the bases. And it's literally the same day, if not a little bit earlier actually, that Paulus runs into the 62nd Army, the 64th Army, then gets counterattacked by the 4th and 1st Tank Armies, which I've covered in the Battlestorm series. And it's at that point they go, uh-oh, we've made a mistake here. But it's too late, because the armies are going south, and they don't really kind of realise this until later on. Halder is arguing that there's too many forces going south into the Caucasus, and that's why he turns 4th Panzer Army around to go and help Paulus out. But there's no real pushback from Halder saying, oh no, we need to keep going to Stalingrad and then Astrakhan, then south. He seems to go along with this Order 45 business, and so do the other generals. As far as I can see, there was nobody going, no, Hitler, actually, we should stick to the original plan. The lack of focus happens because the Soviets collapse, or at least seem to collapse, in that summer period when Foul Blau is going on. And Foul Blau is literally a disaster because of that reason. The Germans expected the Soviets to stand their ground, and then they would encircle them and do all that sort of stuff. The first encirclement was the Battle of Kalach, and that was in the August period. And that's, 2 months after the beginning of the Foul Blau operation. So Foul Blau is a disaster for the Germans in terms of doing what they expected it to do. But when the Soviets collapse, that's when they lose the focus. They didn't lose their goal of getting the oil. That was a main focus. And so you see the Germans take Mayerkop, they bomb Grozny, they don't take that, but they bomb it, and they're almost there. And they're trying to get into the Caucasus, so they are still doing this. Now, in the August period, Hitler himself, and it's not just him but others, are starting to realise that this campaign is going wrong. And it's too late. Because of the Order 45, it's too late to turn things around. Because you imagine if they, they take Mayerkop, and then they go, uh-oh, we need to concentrate on Stalingrad and Astrakhan first, and then go south, we made a mistake. It's not like they can go, all right, I'll tell you what, we'll just withdraw out the Caucasus, then go to Stalingrad and Astrakhan, and then go and retake Mayerkop and whatever. They can't do it. There's no way they can do that. So once they've made this decision to split, they're committed, in a sense. They've committed it. So that's what happens. They lose their focus in the July period. They're trying to do too much at the same time. So it's all to do with that Order 45. But the point is, the reason why they go into the Caucasus early is because Hitler is desperate for that oil, so they haven't lost that focus. There's an argument to be made about whether they lost focus on the Volga and blocking the oil. That is possibly an argument to be made. But in the next season, season 4 of Stalingrad, so that's episodes 10, 11, 12, which I'm still doing the script for, so I can't tell you which exact episode it's in, or episodes, because it might be a couple of bits. But I'm going to explain to you a couple of things. One, Paulus basically thinks that he can take Stalingrad on the march. So that's an element. So it's like, well, why not go? Why did they lose focus of blocking the oil, going up the Volga? Well, they thought they could take Stalingrad, right? Paulus thought he could take it on the march. So maybe they didn't lose the focus there. There's another argument to be made about, could they have gone around Stalingrad and just ignored Stalingrad city and taken the Volga area and blocked the Volga that way? I'm going to discuss that as well. So parts of Christopher's question are going to be answered in the series itself. But for now, I'll say up until they get into Stalingrad and up until they get bogged down in the Caucasus, they haven't really lost the focus. It's just things go wrong And it's because the Soviets are counterattacking like mad at Stalingrad, they're attacking along the Don, they're fighting them in the Caucasus and mounting a pretty successful defensive operation there, and so on and so forth. So it's the Soviets. They originally collapsed for whatever reason, and then they got their act together and started to fight back. Now, yes, they screwed up a lot in the July and August period, we'll say, and even into September, but they're not collapsing. They've not done what the Germans thought they had done, which was just disintegrate, and the Red Army was on its last legs. No, it wasn't. They fought back, and that's the reason why the Germans ended up in this situation where they'd lost their focus, which is one focus, shall we say, to Stalingrad and Astrakhan, then the Caucasus. They messed up. So it really all goes back to that decision of Order number 45. That was the one, the Führer Order, which screwed everything up. And that's why you see people like Citino and Glantz and House and lots of other people saying that Order 45 was the turning point of the 1942 campaign. And so this goes back to Kerscher's original question. Why didn't they send the Romanians south and maybe pull one of the German armies out? Because the focus was the Caucasus. It was better for them to put weaker holding armies along the Don, in theory, to allow their better striking armies to go into the Caucasus. That's the reason why. So it all ties in together. But of course, we know the history, we know what happens. They didn't, they couldn't see it. History is lived forwards and understood backwards. They didn't foresee the fact that, yeah, having these weak Axis allied armies against the Soviets wasn't a very good idea. So that's my take on it, but as I say, I'll explain more in the next season of Stalingrad, which I'm still writing at the minute. So there's that. But yeah, great questions. So thanks for asking them. Thanks for supporting if you're a patron or subscribe Starian. I'll see you again. Thanks. Bye for now.